For all of eternity, man has sought perfection, trying to understand that which makes things great. But perfection is not the absence of flaws, but the embracing, and utilizing of flaws. Yeah, whatever. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's StepsBasic, and welcome back to my community show. So, today I wanted to talk about perfection in gaming. It's kind of a weird thing, you know. I'm not going to talk about it's kind of weird. Like you think about what makes the perfect game and what's important in the game, you know. And for me, like I said at the beginning, it was like when it comes to perfection, it's not a matter of being flawless, but being able to utilize the flaws. And when I think of a perfect game, I can't think of any specific one game. Rather, I look at specific genres and what makes a game into the type of game that it is, and how one would approach quote unquote perfection within the genre. Now, when I say that, naturally, I'm going to have a different opinion than everyone else, because that's one of the biggest problems that I see with the word perfection is there's no one definition for what is perfect. And the way I rate perfection is, like I said, based on how well it plays as what it is. And thinking about it, it's like I can't think, like, my favorite games are not, by any stretch of the imagination, perfect games. Like thinking about Final Fantasy VII, the original one, was a great story, and it was an RPG, a JRPG at that, and so you had the whole saving the world thing, you had the whole being the heroes and getting stronger and all that fun stuff throughout. And as an RPG, it worked. It did exactly what it said on the label. There are a number of flaws to it. Like, well, if you're an old school gamer, then you know hand holding was not a thing back in the day. They didn't tell you where to go. You were expected to talk to people and find out where to go. There were times in that game when I would be lost for ever because I didn't know where I was supposed to go the first time I played it. And so I had to not only figure out who to talk to who's going to give me the information I needed, but where I would be going, after that. And sometimes it was an easy one. Sometimes they'd be like, oh, just talk to the people in the town you're in. But other times it would be complex. Like, I have to go to Gold Saucer, a place I've never been to, or I haven't been to in a while. And I have to go talk to the dude in the workout place, the arena. How do I know this? You have to find and talk to people who are like, oh, I heard that the dude who owns the arena in the Gold Saucer has what you're looking for, or has such and such a new thing on display. And you're like, oh, that's what I gotta do. I gotcha. I'm picking up what you're putting down. I understand now. And apart from that, even for its era, the graphics in Final Fantasy weren't the best. But it was like all like pre-rendered drawings where your character walked around on them. And it worked for the time, But if you think about other games that came out around the same time, like Legend of Legaia, which is another one of my favorite games, they had constructed worlds rather than a painted background. And I think that may have played a little bit more into making it, quote unquote, a better game. So why wouldn't I consider Final Fantasy VII to be a perfect game? Because, I mean, like I said, it comes down to embracing your flaws and working with them. When it came to Final Fantasy VII, I needed to use my own imagination to make things look better. And I know I generally don't, harp on about how looks are important when it comes to games. It is true. But sometimes the Popeye characters would be really hard to, ignore. That doesn't mean that Legend of Legaea's characters were much better, but they at least had more human, proportions to them. They looked like they didn't have fingers. They had these little diamond hands. But, at least it kind of felt more along the lines of that. Additionally, because of the way it was made, RPGs, turn-based combat, the whole waiting around for things to happen could get boring. There were times when I was doing grinding that I would literally start to fall asleep while I was doing it because it was just repetitive nonsense. And RPGs are like that. But what you have to do is find a way to make the grind entertaining, and unfortunately Final Fantasy VII was no good at that because it was literally just wander around and get attacked. Now, of course, if you do it the way I do it, is you find certain places within the story to level up. And so it becomes a little less all at once and more spread out, Other games within the Final Fantasy series have done grinding better. Funny enough, the more recent one, not counting the current one, the 7 Remake, back to 15, still didn't really do it very well. Because even though it was much more action-oriented, you were moving around and everything, I'd still find myself getting drowsy and falling asleep and stuff. The thing that always seemed better to me was incremental rewards. And levels, yes, are incremental rewards. But there's another thing, and that was skills, spells. And Final Fantasy VII, you had your materia, which you leveled up as well, but after a certain point, it just became just like a grind like everything else. But if you look back to Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI, and then again Final Fantasy IX, they had points that you gained additionally where you would level up certain skills. Like going back to 5, when I was a kid, I had a lot of patience. Because what I did with that game was I would take my skills, my new crystals, every time I got crystals, because 5 had job crystals, you put them on your people, and they would learn skills for that job. And once you mastered them, then you could move them to other jobs and stuff. And so when I'd get a new set of crystals, I would max them out almost immediately. Funny enough, that, even though it was quicker than leveling up, sort of, in that it would, the incremental increases were much more, closer. So you didn't feel like you were just out there grinding for nothing forever. And you'd only get like 1 or 2 AP per battle. And, and it was a bit of a drag. And when you could find someplace where you could get like 2 to 3, then you're like, this is where I need to level up. Because you base it less on the experience points and more on the AP. And so as soon as I'd get the crystals, I went out, like the first set of crystals, I went out to the forest right around the temple where you first get the crystals. And I just wandered around the temple forever. And there were some battles there that would give you 2 AP. And I'm like, woo! Some of the jobs required like a massive amount. Like I think the red mage and I know the mime required one of the levels required 999 AP, and that took a minute. But the incremental rewards were always closer within. Like if I wanted to max out a red mage, then I wouldn't turn my entire party into red mages. I'd have one person playing the red mage while everyone else was doing something quicker, like dancer or fighter or stuff like that. And so it always felt like I was progressing, even though I'd spend hours sometimes days outside of that little temple, I still felt like I was accomplishing things, you know? I'd say like 6 was interesting because you learned your spells through Magicite, which were your summons. You equip the Magicite and you'd learn your spells that way. And 9 was about the same way, except instead of the Magicite, you learned it from your weapons and your equipment. And it was kind of fun, you know, swapping equipment around, and you sit in a place until you've mastered and learned all the abilities off of that. And I thought that was going to be more along the same of what we're doing in 7 Remake, but unfortunately it's tied to when you level up. So you're still grinding the same level. And so yeah, that as far as the grind is concerned, those 3 games did it better than 7 did. And I like 7. 7's still my favorite. Going again to Legend of Legaia, that game was, now granted, if you were strong enough, then it became basically the same thing, a grind heavy fest, and you could just tap the same button to attack and kill all the bad guys, and it was perfectly fine. But that one was a martial arts based one, so if you wanted to learn like the higher end abilities, you could actually learn them as soon as you had the chance to, because you'd get like these sections in your action bar where you would be like high punch, low punch, kick, etc. And if you did the right combo, then your character would do a special move. And so it'd be like a little bit more engaging when it came to the fights. And plus the visuals were really cool because the characters like, and then you get that fancy move. But of course, as you leveled up, you gained more action slots, so you can do more. And yeah, that was pretty cool. So, looking at it again, how would I define the perfect RPG? Well, first of all, Final Fantasy VII, best story I played. Really got me into, you know, the whole thing. You know, I was enraptured, following along the whole time. And so, good story. The grind has to be able to be 1, manageable, 2, not boring, and 3, at the very least, have incremental rewards, so you're not just feeling like you're just aiming for the next level every time. Which 7 fell short of, even though it did have materia. The materia was often harder to level up than your characters were. And, and then, of course, there's the characters. 7 had a great amount of characters, had great characters. I loved all the characters. The graphics themselves fell short and were sometimes distracting to the point of like, so for its time, it wasn't even good because Legend of Legaia was about the same time, around the same time period, and their characters looked better. But Final Fantasy 5 and 6 and 9 all had decent character levels or character appearances and graphics. Like, I would look at the representation of 6 as like perfect graphics for the time, because that was when you first get the like whole 3D look of the world and everything. And all the characters, even though they were sprites, were really good sprites. They looked really interesting, really cool, really detailed. They weren't like but yeah, so defining the perfect Final Fantasy game, even though it's not my favorite, I would still say it would probably be 5 was the perfect one as far as everything was concerned, because it ticked all the boxes. Interesting story, the graphics were good for what they were, and the incremental rewards made the combat less, or the grind less boring. As far as Final Fantasies are concerned, I look more towards like perfection in a game as Legend of Legaia is how I would define a perfect RPG, because not only were the battles much more engaging, it did lack for one thing. There were no incremental rewards. if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I played it, but I'm pretty sure there were no incremental rewards. But you were rewarded in a different way, and that was discovering new attacks. So it'd be like, and you could also learn spells by capturing the Saru. That was pretty neat too. I like that. Now that I think about that, yeah, I remember that. God, I remember that game. I want to play that game again. I need to find that game. So even though I count 7 as better, as far as overall game, Legaia was what I would define as a perfect one. Does that make sense? Even though it's not my favorite, I still think it ticked all the boxes towards perfection. But again, like I said, perfection is just a fleeting dream that doesn't exist and none of us can ever achieve it. So don't hold yourself to perfection. Just learn how to deal with your flaws and manage them and turn them to work for you. But anyway, that's about all I got for that topic for today. That felt a little more rambly than I wanted it to, but it's been funny because I've been working on that for about a week, just running through my mind what I wanted to say. And I still managed to get a little rambly. But anyway, that's what you guys love me for, right? Thanks for joining me for this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, please go and poke that like button for me. If you'd like to see more from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And of course, as always, you're more than welcome to comment down in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can, when I can, if I can. You know all that jazz, and tune in next time. We'll talk about another topic at another time, and until then, good night.